Okay, thank you for joining me for our veteran resume training. This training will be veteran specific in some areas, but much of the information is also going to be useful to military family members. So if you're not a veteran and you're viewing this training, don't worry, you're still in the right place. So I want to start by introducing myself. My name is Sarah Wade, and I'm the founder and senior writer at Blue Ridge Resumes. We're a strategic resume writing firm located in Lynchburg, Virginia. I'm a certified professional resume writer, and I work with clients from all over the United States. I've written hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of resumes for clients in just about every industry, probably with very few exceptions to that. I'm also a Marine Corps veteran. I spent 5 years in the Marine Corps in avionics as a calibration technician. So I understand firsthand some of the unique challenges of transitioning from the military and also incorporating that military experience into your resume. Today, I want to provide some training on the current industry best practices for resumes. It seems that there's a lot of contradicting information out there, as well as outdated advice that still seems to be circulating. So I want to clear some of that up and give you some sound strategies to incorporate into your resume that'll make it an effective tool in your job search. So today we're going to cover defining the purpose of your resume. We'll talk about basic formatting rules. Next, we'll go into developing your summary statement and how to incorporate your veteran differentiator. And we'll talk more about what that is and how to leverage that a little bit later. Next, we'll talk about how to use your core skills and areas of expertise section on your resume. And then we'll move on to developing your professional experience section. And we'll discuss strategies on boosting your value proposition as well as translating your military experience. Next, we'll briefly go over awards. So with that, let's jump right in. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the purpose of a resume. Contrary to popular belief, the purpose of a resume is not to convey your comprehensive work history to potential employers. So many job seekers list any and all work experience, whether it's relevant to the opportunity they're applying for or not. The true purpose of a resume is to obtain an interview by showing potential employers how you are qualified for a specific position. I like to say that the resume acts as sort of an appetizer, but not the full course. You don't want to distract or overwhelm hiring managers or recruiters with information that's not valuable to them. You want to quickly communicate that you are qualified for the position, as well as communicate what sets you apart from the competition. So your resume needs to communicate this targeted and specific information to capture the interest of hiring managers so that they want to hear more about you from you. The goal here is to get that interview, right? To get your foot in the door and get a chance to get in front of someone for a conversation. And your resume is one of the key tools that you'll use to do this. All right, next let's talk about formatting. There are some generally accepted best practices when it comes to the format of your resume. So first is margins. Keep your margins between 1/2 inch to 1 inch all the way around. For font size, keep it between 10 to 12 for text and 12 to 14 for headings. For your font style, remember that simple is better. So I suggest using Calibri, Arial, Garmin, or Cambria. For spacing, the biggest rule here is to just be consistent. So if you put one return line between each work experience, then keep that for all work experience. If you put 2 return lines between headings, then keep that consistent for the entire document. However you choose to do it is fine, but again, the key is to just be consistent with your spacing. Okay, length is always the big question for job seekers. Your safest bet is to use either 1 whole page or 2 whole pages. Now, sometimes you've probably heard it's okay to use more than 2 pages. The only exception to this rule is if you're doing a federal resume. And those, of course, can run much longer than 2 pages. And that's probably an entirely separate training in and of itself. But for a targeted resume, you should not run longer than 2 pages. And really, if you have less than 5 years of professional and applicable experience, then you should definitely just be on 1 page. Also, try to avoid using half pages if you can. So you can adjust things like font size, margins, and spacing to ensure that you fill entire pages. Adhering to this rule will help ensure that your resume is balanced and visually appealing to the eye, which is important since your resume is often your first impression on hiring managers. You'll want to leave that professional first impression. Okay, speaking of visual appeal, let's talk about white space for a minute. To ensure that your resume is clean and easy to read, again, leaving that professional first impression, you're going to want to make sure that there is a balanced amount of white space on your pages. You'll want to avoid large blocks of text or a page that's just crammed with too much text. Including adequate amounts of white space will help the reader's eye move easily from one section to another. Okay, and then now on to color. So a lot of people ask if it's okay to use color on their resume. The answer to this really depends on a couple of factors. First is the industry. So usually those in more creative industries, such as marketing, advertising, graphics, or design, can consider safely using color on their resume. Conversely, for those in more conservative industries, things like finance, banking, healthcare, engineering, or project management, they would probably not want to incorporate color. So be mindful of the industry that you're going into, if it's more conservative or if it's more creative in nature. Okay, and then the second factor to consider there is the culture at the organization that you're applying to. So for instance, if you're applying for a position with a company like Google, you can certainly be much more creative with your formatting. However, if you're applying to an organization maybe like Bank of America, you're probably much safer using the traditional black and white format. If you do decide to use color, use it sparingly. Consider only using color for underlining your section headings, and then try to stick to dark shades of red or blue. Okay, next I want to show you the foundation elements or sections of your resume. Sometimes resumes have additional sections based on experience or the specific opportunity, but these are the sections that should be included in really every resume. So it starts with your name and contact info. You're going to use one phone number, a professional email address, and I can't stress that enough, using a professional email address. I saw some statistics recently, and it said that 76% of resumes are rejected for unprofessional email addresses. I think that's outrageous. So my advice here is to create a new free email using your name. So something like first name dot last name or some variation of that. And there are so many free services out there anymore. They're easy to set up and they're easy to use. So creating that separate email will also allow you to easily track all your job hunt communications. Your job hunt emails won't be getting mixed up with your personal or work emails, and you'll be on top of those job hunt communications right away. So it's a great way to stay organized, especially once you start engaging multiple companies or multiple recruiters. Okay, next you'll have the city and state. No need to include your entire address. We used to include them when mail was the primary source of communication, but as we all know, now we conduct the majority of business via email, so no street address is needed. Also, if you're relocating or if you're open to relocation, then exclude your city and state and just have your contact information. And then for those of you with a good LinkedIn presence, you can also include your LinkedIn URL. Next is the summary section, and then the key skills or areas of expertise. These two areas will function as somewhat of a checklist for hiring managers. So as recruiters or hiring managers are scanning over your resume, all the required skills or experience that's called out in the job announcement, as much of it as is applicable to you, should be mentioned somewhere in one of these two sections. This way, hiring managers don't have to sift through all of your professional experience to determine if you meet their qualifications. Once they see right away that you check off all their requirements, then they're more likely to continue reading the rest of your resume. Okay, then comes your professional experience section, and then finally your education. The only reason that education would come before your experience is if you are a recent graduate and you have limited to no experience in the field that you're going into. So for example, let's say in the military, you were in the infantry, but you want to go into marketing and you just got your marketing degree. So in that case, you would list your education before your experience section. Okay, and then finally, a word about ATS systems. Companies that use talent management software or applicant tracking systems, also called ATS systems, companies that use these systems to screen resumes eliminate an average of 50 to 75% of applications before anyone ever even looks at a resume. So it's important that your resume is formatted properly and you're doing what you can to get past these systems. So with that in mind, don't include tables, page borders, or any advanced formatting. Sometimes page borders can throw off ATS systems, and almost all ATS systems don't read information contained inside tables. I've actually seen where people have created their entire resume inside a table. The only time that you can consider using these formatting features is if you know that a person will be reading your resume first. So if you have a recruiter or a hiring manager that is asking for your resume specifically, then you can consider including these elements on your resume. However, if there's a chance that your resume could go into their ATS system, you're better off leaving those elements off of your resume. Okay, now let's talk about the summary. The summary is a modern element of a resume, and it replaces the objective statement. An objective statement is a statement that defines what you're looking for, basically what you want from your employer. So the typical objective statement would go something like, to obtain a job in a field that interests me and allows me to use my skills and education with a growing company that has opportunities for advancement. So it's telling the hiring managers what you want from them, what they can do for you and for your career. The problem here is that employers don't read your resume from this perspective, right? They don't read your resume to see if they can meet all of your needs. So if they're not reading it from that perspective, then you shouldn't be writing from that perspective either. So instead of that objective statement, include a summary that briefly tells what you have to offer your employer. So this is going to be just a few sentences at the top of your resume, and it's going to tell your background, your value, and your differentiator. So think of this as your elevator pitch. So you'll start with a positioning statement. This will include years of experience, industries, market spaces, specializations. Also, you're going to want to include what I call your veteran differentiator. There are so many organizations today that recognize the skill sets that just about all veterans bring to the table. These are things like leadership, integrity, work ethic, determination, learning new things quickly. These are areas where nearly all veterans excel in comparison to their civilian counterparts. Additionally, organizations are actively looking to recruit veterans because they recognize the value that they bring to an organization. So you may have heard them called veteran-friendly, or even better, veteran-passionate employers. These companies are actively looking to specifically hire veterans. So by including a simple reference to your military experience in your summary, you're establishing that you bring these innate military skills with you, and it adds to your overall value. This is your veteran differentiator. So after your positioning statement, you'll want to dive into where your area of specialty is. You'll give a high-level view of your background as applicable to the opportunity that you're applying to. You can expound a little bit on some of the most valuable skills, again, relevant to the position and aligned with your experience, demonstrating that you are the perfect candidate for the job. Also, where possible, you're going to want to give quantitative information to show the scope in which you operated. So, for example, managing multi-million-dollar operations or directing teams of more than 10. This helps show potential employers the level or scale that you've operated in. Your summary should communicate your overall value through offering a highlight of experience, skill set, and specialization. So you can write this in either bullet point format or in paragraph form, but keep it brief either way. So no more than 4 to 5 sentences or bullet points. Remember, this is just your elevator pitch. So I wanted to give you a couple of examples of great summaries. So the first one, global sales executive. So this defines and positions you right away. And veteran Army commander. This is the veteran differentiator. Brings to the table 20 plus years, there's that years of experience, of senior international management experience in sales and business process outsourcing. So those are the areas of specialization. Proven experience launching and growing new lines of business into multi-million-dollar organizations for companies such as Xerox and Microsoft. So that is your quantified information. Strategic leader, identifying and building strong relationships with key decision makers across client spaces. Okay, the second one, business development professional with 10 plus years of leadership experience across Army operations. That's that veteran differentiator again. Fortune 400 and startup organizations, specializing in identifying and building strategic relationships, capturing opportunities to maximize profitability, penetrating new market spaces, and driving multi-million-dollar sales pipelines. Those are all areas of specialization. Tenacious and ambitious nature with high level of business acumen, skilled at employing assertive diplomacy to negotiate lucrative agreements and partnerships. So these are just two examples, and you can see where we've worked in their veteran differentiator. Sometimes it's easier than others. Sometimes you need to get a little bit creative to get it in there. But you can see it doesn't take a lot. We don't go into any detail. We just throw it out there for now, and then details will come later under your professional experience. Okay, now moving on to the core skills or areas of expertise. This section is very effective for incorporating keywords from the job announcement. And doing that is going to help you get noticed by those ATS systems that we discussed earlier. So when they do their scan for keywords, this will help ensure that your resume pops up. This section gives a very quick snapshot of those core areas that you specialize in. You're going to place this section directly following your summary. And there are a couple of different ways to go about writing this section. So first, you can create a bullet list of just the keywords that align to your experience. And then in the second option, you can expound a little bit on each skill to show sort of the how behind it. One thing to keep in mind, no matter which option you choose here, you must be able to back up each of these skills with an accomplishment in the experience section of your resume. So, for example, you can't just say that you're good at project management and then never show anything about project management experience in your resume. So here are examples of the two options for writing this section. You can see the first option is basically a list of core skill sets, while the second option goes into a little bit more detail about your experience in each area. If you use the first option, keep it to no more than 15. If you use the second option, no more than 5. Now let's move on to your professional experience. So the first area I want to cover here is translating your military experience. I'm sure everyone has heard about the necessity of this, right? The reason it's important to translate your military experience is to clearly communicate your experience in terms that your civilian counterparts can understand, as well as communicate the skills that you built that might otherwise be lost on the reader who's unfamiliar with military culture. So as we all know, regardless of the branch, there are a lot of acronyms and military-specific jargon that we use that need clarification on your resume. So when you translate your experience, you'll want to basically swap out those military terms for civilian ones. And then also be careful when you do this. You don't want to diminish your accomplishments or the scope of your duties. Use civilian terminology, but don't diminish what you did and what you accomplished. So an example of this would be, instead of saying led a 40-soldier platoon to successfully accomplish the mission, you would say led a department of 40 to consistently accomplish critical organization objectives. So this still highlights your leadership abilities with large teams, and it doesn't diminish the scope of what you did. There are a number of tools out there to help with translating that experience and finding that civilian vocabulary. You can do a quick search online and find many of them that will actually drill down to the branch and occupational specialty level. These are usually great sites to read through and find that civilian vocabulary for your specific occupation. Here I've included just a brief list of some really common military terms and their civilian translations. You can see by this list that we're not changing the meaning or diminishing any part of the original term. We're simply using civilian vocabulary in its place. So this just gives you an idea how you can incorporate civilian vocabulary. Okay, the next thing to remember when writing your professional experience section is to focus on relevant information. So not all skill sets that you gained in the military or even at a former civilian employer will be relevant to where you're positioning yourself to go. The professional experience section of your resume is not a comprehensive career history of every job that you've ever done. This is a targeted section where you're going to show accomplishments to back up your statements made in the summary and skills section. So in this section, you're only going to go back 10 to 15 years. This is considered relevant experience and shows the progression of your career. The reality is that skills used 15 plus years ago and never used since then are of no real value to you or potential employers. In addition, focusing on that 10 to 15 year window helps curb any age discrimination by keeping your resume feeling fresh and up to date. One side note here, if you are pursuing a senior level or executive position, then it is okay to go back to about 20 years, as the expectation is for more seasoned leadership experience. Okay, you're going to format dates with year only. So when writing your dates on a resume, use only years. For example, 1998 to 2006. This can be so helpful if you have any employment gaps or to eliminate useless positions. So short-lived positions that don't add any value to your career experience or the opportunity that you're applying for can be left off as long as they don't create a gap. Not to mention, it just makes for a cleaner and more streamlined presentation. And then for each experience entry, include employer name, dates, and your title. This would seem like an obvious point to make, but many job seekers forget to include one or more of these key elements. It's also important to be consistent in how you format these. There's no right or wrong way here. There's no specific order that you have to put these in. I know I've written resumes with job titles first and then some with employer names listed first. But whatever way you choose to do it, you just have to be consistent. So in some cases, you may have multiple positions with one employer, like the Marine Corps. And in this instance, you're going to list your employer once with the date for the entire time you were with that employer. Then you're going to list the titles, dates, and all of your description and accomplishments with a small line break in between. Obviously, this is just an example, but you can see that we've listed the employer once, followed by the date for the entire tenure at that organization. Then we followed up with title and the individual dates for each position. You'll also notice, going back to translating that military terminology, right? We listed the title in civilian terms, and then we put rank and military title in parentheses. Okay, next, talk about responsibilities. So once you have the employer information, you want to talk briefly about your responsibilities. This is going to be 2 to 3 sentences directly under the employer or title information. You're basically going to answer the question, what were you hired to do? So a critical element of this will be including quantified information to give the scope of your responsibilities. So for example, managed 8 employees across 3 projects or oversaw P&L on 15 million worth of projects. This gives potential employers a clear picture of the level at which you operated. Okay, next is accomplishments. You're going to move on to the most important element of your professional experience section, which is your accomplishments. Your accomplishments will drastically boost your value proposition to employers by focusing on results. Results demonstrate the value that you brought to employers in your past positions and the potential value you can bring to a new organization. So you're going to place these as bullet list items directly under your responsibilities. Also, for accomplishments, you'll want to quantify. It just isn't enough to say that you successfully managed all your troops or all inventory was accounted for after an exercise. Wherever possible, use quantifiable information to back up these claims. So you would say managed 25 plus troops, ensuring compliance in all training, safety certifications, and required physical standards. Or you would say achieved 100% accountability for $15 million worth of equipment in key global exercise. The more quantified and specific information that you can give, the stronger your accomplishments and resume will be. And this is an example of how this looks. So we have his responsibilities listed first, followed by his accomplishments in this position, bulleted out. And that's going to be the format you'll want to follow. Okay, sometimes accomplishments are difficult to identify. I suggest looking at your performance reviews. Usually you'll be able to get quantified information from them, but also they're a great summary of what you were able to accomplish. Other times you may need to do a bit of brainstorming. Here are some questions that I often give my clients as a jumping off point to start thinking about what they accomplished in a position. What's the greatest contribution you've made? Describe some of the challenges and how you overcame them. Have you ever contributed to cost savings? Describe a few projects you've worked on. Have you increased efficiency or saved time? What do your performance metrics look like, right? Not all of these questions will be applicable to every situation, but they do get you thinking in the right direction to start identifying your unique accomplishments. Another great way to identify accomplishments is to look at your responsibilities or duties. So think about the results of each duty or responsibility that you successfully executed. You'll want to focus on what action you took, what did you do, what problem it solved, and what the results were. So this is known as the CAR or CAR method, challenge, action, result. Be specific in your information and avoid broad generalizations. So here's an example using that CAR method. So the original accomplishment statement is answered phones and helped customers. And really that's more of a duty or responsibility than it is an accomplishment, right? So the challenge here, customers calling in with requests for warranty repair on various equipment. The action, answered phones and assisted customers by providing return shipping information. And then the result, you ensured customer satisfaction and eased the shipping process. So the new accomplishment statement becomes drove customer satisfaction and eased shipping processes through fielding 50 customer calls daily, providing high-level customer service for warranty repair requests. So you can see the drastic difference in these two accomplishment statements. The second statement uses quantified information and specifically describes the problem that you solved and how you solved it. It is a much stronger statement and communicates much more value than the original statement. By taking the time to translate your terminology, focus on results, and identify relevant accomplishments, your resume will be that much stronger and it's going to boost your value proposition to employers. Okay, now I want to touch briefly on awards. Often veterans ask if they should include their awards on their resume, and if so, which ones? Maybe all of them, maybe none of them. The best rule here is to include personal awards or uncommon awards, so those earned for a specific action that you took. Unit awards or things like good conduct awards, and some of the other maybe more generic ones just take up space on your resume without adding any real value. When you list an award, provide 1 to 2 sentences about what you did to earn it. That way, if the reader is not familiar with military culture or awards, they'll be able to understand that it was your exceptional performance that actually earned this award and exactly what you did. Again, providing that little bit of added detail adds value to your accomplishment. If you have more than 2 awards to list, you'll do so on a separate section at the end of your resume. If you have 2 or less, you can just include them in your professional experience section. And that concludes our training for today. I encourage you to reach out with any questions or feedback about this training. My email is sarah@blueridgeresumes.com. I also encourage you to go to our website and check out our services. If you are struggling with putting your resume together, please go out to our website and see if maybe that's something we can do for you. And please connect with me on LinkedIn. If you viewed this training, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining me, and I hope that each one of you got some valuable information out of this training today that you can use on your resume.